Skincare is more than the products that we use. It really is the embodiment of our moment-to-moment experience. I like to think about skincare in the context of connection and relationship. It's the connection and relationship with ourselves.
Welcome to the Learn Skin podcast with me, Dr. Raja.
And me, Dr. Hadar, where we discuss all things skin.
Join us as we delve into the art and science of skin health in today's episode.
Hey, Raja, can you say the thing I told you to tell them?
Of course. We are board-certified dermatologists. This podcast is meant for educational and informational purposes only and is not considered medical advice, nor does it serve as a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. All opinions shared do not express the views of Learn Health, Inc. Let's get to the good stuff.
Hey, Raja, how are you today?
Hey, Hadar. I've been thinking, have you been getting in your head a lot lately?
Way back when in my undergraduate training, I had a teacher who always told me, Hadar, you're in your head. You're in your head. Get out of your head. So yes, I'm always in my head. I think we are all actually way too much in our head and kind of forget to let our body maybe take over and kind of feel within our body and within our space that we occupy. We kind of tend to live about, 3 days ahead, right?
Well, we need a little help thinking through this because there's definitely a mind-body connection. And we have, I think, one of the experts within integrative dermatology to talk to us about this, Dr. Keira Barr. She is dual board certified as an integrative dermatologist, and she's also a dermatopathologist. So she has gone from looking at the cellular level of our bodies now to really looking at how does this mind-body approach really bring it all together. She is highly sought after. I've seen her work being featured in all kinds of widely read publications like Mind Body Green, Reader's Digest, Oprah Magazine. But guess what? Keira, you're with us today, and we're super excited.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Good. Excellent. Welcome to the program. I want to ask you a very basic question because I think some of our listeners may be longtime listeners, first-time mind-bodyers. And when we talk about mind-body connection, when it comes to skin, what does that really mean?
It's a great question. And I think what many people may not appreciate is that our skin and our brains are derived from the same embryologic tissue. So from the same layer, the ectoderm. So the brain and the skin are directly connected. There's a bidirectional communication between our skin and our brain.
That is fascinating. And we see this quite often in dermatology, I think, but we tend to think about it in a diagnostic sense. We see certain patterns in the skin maybe that makes us think that, but we forget about the function of what it means and can it be therapeutically leveraged? And so the question, I guess, that follows is, how do you leverage this in your clinic to improve skincare or skin pathology, if you will, for your patients?
Yeah, so I'm not in a traditional clinic anymore. The focus of my practice actually is just working with people to help them manage their stress and leverage this mind-body connection. Because for me, skincare is more than the products that we use. It really is the embodiment of our moment-to-moment experience. I like to think about skincare in the context of connection and relationship. It's the connection and relationship with ourselves. It's the connection and relationship between our brain, our body, and our behaviors and our beliefs. And when those relationships are neglected or ignored or rejected even, it activates our stress response. And activation of that stress response creates a whole cascade of hormones and inflammatory signals. And it's not just a top-down situation. Most of us think that when we are stressed and we're activating our hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, it's from the brain down. And so activation of that pathway leads to a release of hormones and chemicals that flow throughout the body. And then the skin is a target of that. But again, because the brain and the skin are so intimately connected embryologically, the skin actually has its own mechanism. It has its own HPA axis, its own sympathetic adrenal medullary axis, which means the skin is both a target and a source of all the same hormones that our brain produces during a stress response. So our skin plays a big role in what shows up on our skin and how we feel in it.
Well, this reminds me of one of the most famous test questions that I had in my medical school class. By the way, anyone from UCD class of 2008, yay, I took a year off to do research, so I was like pseudo class 2009, but we still, like anyone listening, we still remember our very first test question, which was, what is the precursor to alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone? And it was pro-opiomelanocortin. I'll never forget this, the POMC. And like you're saying, it's generated in the brain, but then it goes off to become adrenocortical stimulating hormone, ACTH. And then you also have the melanocyte stimulating hormone. So your point's a really good one. And it seems that not only with the brain, but the adrenal gland, like you were mentioning, about stress or cortisol, do you think there's a connection with those same hormones being produced in the skin too? Because I know epinephrine, norepinephrine, they're produced locally in the skin as well, in addition to coming off of the adrenal glands.
Yeah. And so I do. I think, with production of cortisol and norepinephrine and epinephrine, there's a direct correlation. I mean, if you look at the studies that really show this on a cellular level, corticotropin releasing hormone and cortisol can stimulate our oil glands directly. And it also influences the inflammatory response, affects the skin barrier function. So I think, locally and systemically, the skin has all those receptors. So it's like a double whammy.
Yes, absolutely. And I loved your initial comments because there's so much to unpack there. One of the things you mentioned is about skincare, and it really made me think about the actual physical act of caring for your skin. And that usually means applying stuff on your skin, various creams and lotions and what have you. And I wonder if you can comment on this idea that just touching your skin, the idea of really caring for it, touching, looking at it, getting that biofeedback back and forth can reduce the level of stress, can change our health in general.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The act of touching and sensation releases that feel-good hormone, the love hormone, oxytocin, which will have the exact opposite effect of what cortisol, our primary stress hormone, will have. So it can balance and kind of regulate things. I think when we talk about stress, it seems like it's this big bad elephant in the room, but stress in and of itself isn't a bad thing. It's really our perception of it. Our stress response is part of our innate biology. It's part of our innate ability to adapt to our environment. And everyone's perception of stress is going to vary. So I think that's really important too. Something that I might find stressful, you might not. But it's really our definition of stress that informs how we perceive stress and then how we're going to respond to it based on our lived experience. And that really is going to have an influence over how significant those shifts and changes that we see manifest on the skin occur. So that idea of truly taking care of your skin with touch can be very soothing and very supportive for some people, right? Depending on if it's self-touch, but not everyone, having others touch their skin may not be as supportive depending on their history of trauma or what have you. So I think it's really important to understand what an individual's definition of stress or what their stressors are.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, even in the skin, there's all data now about massage therapy and how it can improve skin outcomes in eczema, for example. So that's definitely important. But I love what you said about stress is part of life. And we just got to be able to kind of take it in and move through the stressful periods and actually embrace the stress as a positive thing. And I think that kind of mindset is so important. And it does have some biological underpinning, as you were mentioning. I mean, if you read a lot of the aging literature, really the bottom line of it is sort of what doesn't kill you make you stronger. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that people should go and torture themselves or that any such kind of thing is positive. But when things do happen, it is really important to be able to kind of take in the stress, work through it, and understand that in a way there could be a positive outcome out of this because your biology is built to deal with this. So I think it's a very shrewd observation there, and actually very translatable to skin. I mean, not to go off too much, but even within the kind of aging literature and talking about how stress affects the skin, there's evidence in wound healing that those stress pathways, if you engage them and help them go back to what they were before, that you get better healing of the skin, for example. So sort of a very nice big concept that you can actually show in the lab. So thank you for bringing that in.
Yeah, no, to your point. I mean, they've shown the stress response, as cortisol goes up, one of the things that cortisol does is it breaks down collagen and elastin and also prevents production of collagen, which directly will impede wound healing. And also it's why we see more fine lines, wrinkles, and skin sag. So I think one of the people spend thousands and thousands of dollars on anti-aging procedures and lotions and potions and all of that. And the best anti-aging treatment of all time is really learning how to regulate your own stress response.
Yes. And also, it's to your point, is that it's also a type of stress, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of what we do to the skin, right, to make it look better and kind of feel better is actually stressful, right? We injure it. I mean, all the resurfacing lasers and microdermabrasions, those are injuries to the skin. Microneedling, for example, all these are injuries to the skin with the goal of getting better outcomes, sort of inducing the right form of stress.
Oh my gosh, Hadar, that's such a brilliant point. And actually, that makes me want to direct the question to you, Keira. It's such a brilliant point because, yeah, we sometimes intentionally stress the skin to make it more youthful, right? So, Keira, what are the different kinds of stresses that are out there, and which aspects are you really trying to key in on when you're taking a mind-body approach?
Right. So there's eustress, which is kind of a good stress. It's kind of the intentionality, right? So, Hadar, to your point, we are leveraging how to stress the body to produce an outcome that we want to see. Eustress is also getting a promotion, right? Or like getting married or, listening to music at a concert. It's activation of our sympathetic response, but we are able to kind of come back online. The type of stress that I'm talking about is more distress. And we think of Dr. Dan Siegel's work about window of tolerance, right? So you can't see I'm like making gestures with my hands, but imagine there's like a box, there's a top and there's a bottom, and it's this area in the middle. And within that area in the middle is what we call a window of tolerance. And that's where we can have stressors, and then we go through the stress response cycle. We come back online and we come back into so-called homeostasis, right? Kind of imbalance. The challenge, especially with chronic stress, being in a pandemic and current events, and where we are feeling kind of like it's too much, too fast, too soon, and we go above our own window of tolerance. That is the area where trauma occurs, where our capacity to manage our stress goes offline. And that's where people feel wired and tired and exhausted and anxious. And that's the area that I'm referring to of how can we support to get us back within our window of tolerance.
And to me, one of the perfect examples to those stressors you're mentioning is, for example, technology, right? How we have to engage with everybody around us all the time, 24/7. We got to be on. And I think a lot of people forget that it doesn't have to be like that. One of the things I try to do for myself is have regular periods of disconnection where that allows me to really focus on what I'm trying to achieve. What is my next move in the next moment, as opposed to, 3 years down the line. And I think it's a tangible kind of tool, an example that you can use that this, we choose to live above that middle of the box you were mentioning by exposing ourselves to all these technology stressors. And again, I'm not suggesting that you should go back to a cave for the rest of your life. All I'm saying is there are some extra stressors in the form of technology, for example, social media, you get that extra app, that extra, streaming service, what have you, whatever your technology binge is. And that adds that level of stress that you can definitely live without, and it's giving you more harm than good in a way.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think it's a matter of really resourcing. Like, what are your resources? One of them would be to put your technology away, going out in nature, sitting quietly with a cup of tea. It doesn't have to be these big, overt gestures to help regulate our stress response at all. It can be something very simple. And to your point, I just wanted to circle back. Earlier, you were talking about skincare and touch, and it just made me remember, when we came into this world, we didn't have language. We cried, but we couldn't speak. So our primary language was touch, sensation, and movement, right? That's what
Right.
somatics, the soma, the body, and somatics is like the living body. And that's why so much of the work that I do is not so much talking, but it's more of the embodiment practices and kind of coming back and getting back in touch with that primary language. So I do think in terms of being able to help ourselves and regulate our response, sometimes, we get so caught up in our head as we started this conversation that sometimes our bodies will say what our brain won't. And we can also process through our emotion and the stressors through our body when our brain won't shut down. So sometimes you have to move faster than you can think. So that's where modalities like dance or exercise can be really powerful in terms of helping reset our nervous system to rebalance that stress response. I mean, nothing beats putting on, your favorite song and having a dance party. I mean, it's like, I think one of the best.
Yes. Yes. And in my dance parties, usually nobody's invited. Just
That's right.
dancing,
You
right?
dance like no one's
Just
watching.
moving in the space
Exactly.
all by yourself, putting your favorite song on and just rocking to it. It can be such a great tool. Speaking of tools, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that in your practice, which doesn't necessarily pertain to skin, what kind of tools you use and recommend to your clients when they come and say, I need some mind body tools to kind of reset?
Yeah. So it's always very individualized of meeting people where they're at. If you're feeling very overwhelmed and anxious and kind of wound up, if I were to tell you, just close your eyes and just breathe, they'd be like, if we were live together, like they might want to punch me in the nose because when
Right.
you're agitated like that, like, you may not feel like just sitting and meditating. So we need to have lots of tools in our toolbox. So for some people, it's guiding them through a visualization. It is teaching them breathwork techniques. But for others, I literally will have them use props and we might throw a pillow or, do some ball work. It really depends. So I think that's what is so amazing is there are so many ways, so many tools that we can use using tapping into our senses, movement, visualization, various forms of meditation. So there is no one perfect thing because we are all so unique in how we perceive stress, how we embody that stress. So we're going to need a whole bunch of different tools to help us manage that stress response.
So, Keira, I have a question on when you talk to people about mind body interventions or approaches, how often do they try it and maybe fail at it and then need more encouragement to just keep going with it? I want to put it into like a real life context. When you give someone an exercise, how many times do you need to encourage them to keep going, or maybe a slight little tweak here, tweak there, or are most of the ones that are successful going to pick it up on the first go around?
It's called a practice. There is no such thing as perfection, right? And I think that's really it. Whatever practice that I guide someone through, I always preface it as there's no way to do it wrong. And that's, I think, the most important thing. There's no way to do this wrong. The fact that you are willing to take time to be with yourself, to try and feel better, like you're already winning. Like, so I think it's a matter of giving it a try, see how it feels. And definitely it's not a one and done. So I recommend that people dedicate, on a daily basis as part of their home practice. And it could be as short as 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever they can tolerate, because we can increase the capacity over time. I was like, listen, You think of this as like going to the department store where you are on the floor and you're like looking at all the racks and you're picking things out and you're going to take them to the dressing room. And sometimes you get in the dressing room and you hold it up to light and you're like, hell no, I'm not. I'm not even going to try that on.
Right.
And then others, right? You try them on, they fit pretty good, you're going to take them with you. It's the same thing with all these practices. You just try something, see how it feels. And if it doesn't feel good, you move on.
Right. I wanted to ask you because one of the things that maybe it's a stereotype that exists out there is that these interventions are for a certain type of people. Maybe it's for people who got time on their hands, right? Or it's kind of an intellectual kind of exercise, although what you've described is actually very physical to me. Can you break some of these stereotypes and tell us kind of broad categories about your clients? And is this something for everybody?
Absolutely, it's for everyone. So they're teaching mindfulness to very young kids, right? And in many ways, our kids are our role models because they just play and they shake things off. And so this is for everyone of all ages. And it's not something that needs to take a lot of time. It certainly can if you have that luxury of time that you really, take the time away and can sit for 20 minutes or an hour to dedicate to your practices. Fabulous. But most people, you can do things within just a few seconds. And I think the simplest practice that you can do is paying attention to your breathing, just bringing awareness to your breath, because you don't have to add anything more to your to-do list, right? You're already breathing, but breathing is subconscious as well as you're able to bring it under your conscious control. So simply tuning into, how am I breathing? Am I breathing? Am I holding my breath? I find that when I'm really stressed, sometimes I don't even realize I'm holding my breath. So that's number one, is just tuning into, are you breathing? How are you breathing? Are you breathing fast or slow? Are you breathing, in through your nose or out through your mouth? Or are you breathing more in your chest or your belly? That's something that you can be doing as you're walking down the hallway to your next patient door, right? Another really easy practice is really just tapping into your senses, your sensory awareness, and it provides feedback about what's going on. Simply while you're in the patient room, running the water and listening to the sound of the water, the temperature of the water on your hands, the smell of the soap, the texture of the soap on your hands. All of that are mindfulness practices that bring you right back into this present moment, not worrying about what's going to happen after, whatever patient interaction that might have been a little wonky beforehand. By tapping into your senses, it brings you right into the here and now, really regulates that stress response. And it's something that you're already going to be doing, right? You're already going to wash your hands before you see a patient. You're already breathing. So those are practices that anyone can do, and it doesn't take a lot of time.
Right. Excellent. I love this. And I want to clarify to some of our listeners, and especially to my daughter out there, that Keira did not suggest that shopping is a mind-body exercise. I just want to make sure that that's pretty clear to everybody, especially those who hold my credit card. Hey, Keira, thank you so much for joining us again. It's always a pleasure conversing with you. And I feel like every time I talk to you, literally my mind is expanding into the different ways I can incorporate these simple mind-body practices to just feel better, be present, and be more effective in my life. So thank you for your time and your expertise.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, Raja, do you know where the integrative medicine movement started?
According to Google, since Google knows everything, Dr. Andrew Weil founded the Center for Integrative Medicine at the University of Arizona in Tucson back in 1994. Why do you ask?
Well, you know how we always try to get to the root cause? I think we need to go big for the fifth annual Integrative Dermatology Symposium. How about we do this? Let's meet at the Los Ventana Canyon Resort in Tucson, Arizona. Or you can join virtually from September 30th to October 2nd and hear from the world-renowned experts like Andrew Weil.
Exciting. And our theme is connecting mind, body, and spirit to take a more holistic approach to our patient care. What do you say?
Absolutely. I mean, where else can you get the latest on diet and dermatology, hypnosis, botanicals, common diseases, aesthetics, and other unique topics in dermatology with practical takeaways to start using in clinic right away?
So true. And let's not forget, we've got the new track for estheticians too. I think I'm going to need to call in a sick day or two before the symposium so I can enjoy the waterfall and trails on the resort, stargaze, play a round or two of golf, or tennis, relax at the spa, and catch up with colleagues at the evening receptions.
Yes, that place is spectacular. Use our discount code POD25 at checkout for 25% off.